The general idea is asking for help at the workplace is considered a sign of weakness for fear of being judged.
Of course.
Um, is that true?
Yeah, I think that is true depending on the kind of workplace you are. Plus, being a doctor or a resident in training is very demanding. So, if you're not able to, say, hold your shit together or something like that, they'll say, have grow a thick skin. And these were things that have been told to me as well. But I think that is a blessing that I had some of these few people in front of whom I could be vulnerable. And because they knew that I'm good and that I'm struggling to get over these things, they were in my corner. They were not the ones who were not trusting me to be somebody who's reliable. I mean, despite knowing everything that I can get so emotionally affected, they were still the ones who would want to hire me and make sure that after I pass out as a student, I be there because I was good. So eventually, if I'm talking to the patient, I'm so good, I'm doing my work very diligently, but it's the aftermath that I'm struggling with, which is all in me as a person. So yeah, I mean, if you have such nice, but you'll have to build that connection repo. You have to prove yourself that yeah, you are doing your job. And if this struggle is there, I mean, people are just human. So yeah, you'll have to find that window with whom you can be vulnerable with, open out to them, and they should allow you that. I mean, they'll be kind enough then to let you have that time, that breather, take time off, come back, help you in ways that are possible.
From what you've said, being a sensitive person does not mean it's the end for you as a doctor. You can still pursue a profession in medicine even if you're a sensitive individual.
Of course, of course. It's it's about learning so many things. That being sensitive is also such a skill that not everybody has. And being in medicine, I think that's a very, very crucial and important skill that your patient wants. I mean, you treat them like a human because you have that sensitivity to understand what they're going through, and empathy. So I realized that from being very pragmatic and I mean, this is a job, this has to be done, to processing my emotions has also been a long process to understand that these things are really troubling me, and then I have to seek help and I have to get better so that I can continue helping others. So that is how I was able to, yeah, get back at it.
Early on, you'd mentioned that you had to switch from nuclear medicine to palliative care. Can you take us through that? What uh, inspired this change?
Yeah, so while I was preparing for USMLE and I was headed to US 2013, my mom started showing some weird neurological symptoms, difficulty walking, and a little slurring of speech. So while I was still an intern, all of this was happening, and we were trying to get her diagnosed. And it so happened that I started being a second-hand caregiver to my own mom while I was still preparing for my masters. That I realized that it's a lot of effort, to take care of somebody, and it's just very normalized. I mean, thankfully, in my case, my father was the primary caregiver. He was very clear about how he did not want me to leave my career because these were conversations that I had to have with him. Okay, do you want me to just be here, take care of mom? Because she started deteriorating so rapidly. And he said, no, this is not your life. She's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to finish what you have started. So now that you've gotten into MBBS and you've done that, you have to study for your master. And since it was a cumulative dream for everybody, more of theirs than mine, that I go ahead and do it in US, he was very supportive that I go ahead and do that. But then the challenges that I was seeing throughout, first hand or second hand, wherever I was, that caregiving is so extremely difficult. And the kind of support that we got from my mom was everything on your own. You keep on figuring out every step of the way, except for a few medications that you have on the prescription. Unfortunately, I did not find any help from the medical community then, and that was really jarring. So for somebody who's trying to become a good doctor, the kind of things that I was seeing was shaking my belief and faith in the entire system, that what am I even doing. And there was this instance in 2017, a month or so before she passed, where she had to be put on a ventilator, and I was in Delhi. And my family, they just called me back home that now that they've put her on the ventilator, we really don't know how to navigate, so you'll have to come home. And when I went home, um, it was again very shocking that I am a postgraduate student. So everybody in the hospital is talking to me in a way that that nothing can be done. She's on the ICU in ventilator. As soon as we take the ventilator out, she's going to die. So why you prolonging it? I said, Ki, you already put this before we came in here. Okay, so they're asking us to take us home basically, but they are not ready to do it the official way, saying that this is discharge against medical advice. So it was like, pull the plug, but I am taking the decision of pulling the plug. You are saying this to me informally, but that is not something that you can put on paper. And then I at that time said, ki, okay, if you're going to remove the ventilator, what will happen? She's going to be gasping or she'll get really restless. What do you give her then? Do you have morphine or anything else? I mean, I had just this knowledge from watching whatever Western medicine series and a little bit what I'd seen read in MBBS. And the doctors in my hometown there in that hospital said that no, morphine is illegal and there's nothing that we can really do about it. So that was like a lightning flash, that you're saying it's illegal and it was taught to me in my second year of pharmacology. And where is this? Why is nobody using it? So that was the time that I was really intrigued to know what happens at this time and why is nothing here. And that is when I learned of the word palliative medicine. And there's this specialty which was, I should say, so hidden from all of us, that I had to seek out more training, certificate courses in that to learn about it. And 3 days of certificate course, contact classes, I came here in Bangalore and did that. And that was just uh, amazing. I was just so surprised to see that they're talking about these human things that are going to happen, not necessarily at the end of life, but how do you cater to them? How do you act in your capacity as a doctor and as a human? That I was like, "Bhai, this is something that I really want to do more." So one certificate course, another course, and then 1 year's fellowship, and all of that while I am doing something in nuclear medicine because yeah, that pays, so I have to keep doing it. So yeah, I went on training in palliative medicine, and that was an amazing journey. And I realized that this is something that at least we in India really need to talk about, to do, to just train a lot of other people to be out there. I mean, tell people that help is available and make sure that there are other people to help. So that is how now I've quit my job and I hope to figure out something substantial in palliative so that I'm able to do a little bit more in the caregiver space.
So you'd mentioned that you did not get much help from the medical community. Can you elaborate a bit? What exactly did you mean by that?
I mean, not telling us what can we expect to happen. So, for somebody who is having a neurodegenerative condition, I understand that they might be thinking that since I'm a medico, I will have an idea. But me having an idea does not mean that I can be the one who's explaining all of it to my father or everybody else in my family. So, there are these things in palliative medicine that we do. It's called family meeting. So you make sure everybody is sitting there. You tell them about how the patient is doing. You ask them what they're understanding about the patient's condition. And once they've understood where they are, that is when they talk about the goals of care. Ki, okay, now what does the family think would be the most important step for us to care? Ki, the patient should be eating orally if that is the most important thing to them, or not having a lot of tubes. So that is something that you talk to the family, you elicit what their expectations are, and then you try to offer whatever is in your capacity. So this entire system did not exist. I mean, from the ICU, you get a discharge against medical advice paper. In fact, that was also not given. And I had to go back and fight the ICU in charge. Ki how is not there not a discharge summary for everything that happened here? And then he gave me this DAMA paper, discharge against medical advice, and just the list of medicines that she was already on because she did not pass away after pulling the plug. So we had to take her home. And then again, taking her home, and then how do we care for her because she was a ventilator. Now at home, do I need oxygen concentrators? There was no help from the medical community because I was a medico. I was figuring out, okay, on and off, we'll put oxygen, so get a concentrator at home, have a trained nurse, and then do things. But this is the kind of support that palliative care gives, and that is required. Not every caregiver is going to be in the capacity to navigate by themselves. And yeah, as a branch of medicine, we are pretty poorly equipped that people still don't know that this exists. Even healthcare professionals don't know what is palliative medicine. Yeah.
Is palliative care new in India?
Yeah, palliative care has been in India for more than say 30 years, 30 to 40 years. But even now, the access to palliative care resources in India, as per the literature, still remains, say, if there are 4 million people who need these services, not even 4% are getting them. And this is the statistics that has been there for more than, say, 15, 20 years. So, despite the awareness increasing and more people taking it up as a specialty, more doctors getting aware about it and referring to palliative care whenever they should be involved, uh, we are a huge country and it's very difficult to tell people. I mean, most people don't even know that, okay, if you have this particular medical issue, which kind of doctor do I need to go for this? So, palliative care is way far because our health literacy is not at all empowering our people to know. I mean, if this is a problem, this is the way to go. So yeah, I mean, palliative care is not new, but it is still a way from taking over and getting integrated with our core healthcare system. So that has to be as a part of policies when government really makes these rules that each hospital is supposed to have a department. Only then things will change.
Okay, so again, so not every hospital has a palliative
No,
unit.
very less hospitals have a palliative care department. And wherever they are still doing the heavy lifting by training the rest of the hospital of what kind of impact they can make and then work alongside them so that it just does not remain, isolated, which people are not aware of. So, yeah, now that it's a part of our MBBS curriculum, they've recently made this as a mandate. So, people will be more um, acquainted to palliative medicine, starting medicine.
So, for a layman, what is palliative medicine or palliative care?
Yeah, so for a layman, palliative care is basically taking supportive care, taking care of your symptoms or any other kind of burden which might be happening because of any serious health related suffering. So it's to mitigate your health related suffering for the patient and for the entire family. So that is how palliative care looks, not at the disease per se, but holistically as a person, as a family. And I mean, treating the symptoms is something that definitely happens. So it's basically an added layer of care to whatever's going on. But people unfortunately think that including palliative care means giving up, that you're stopping everything else and now you're preparing for them to die. That's not how it is. So it is something that should be started as early as possible from the time of a serious illness diagnosis, because it will take into account a person's mental framework, psychology, emotions, how the family is dealing with it, how they're coping with it. Sometimes it can be finances, if there's a single breadwinner who's dealing with everything. So, looking at the entire picture through a team of people, not just one doctor, there's going to be nurses, psychologists, social worker, physiotherapist. So, everybody works together to make sure that you are helped, you're feeling better.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, doctor. So let's say, for example, you have a patient who's diagnosed with stage 2 cancer, and the patient comes with their family. So once the prognosis is given, then as per the palliative team, not only suggests and guides the patient on what is the next course of action, but once you get back home, you also educate the family on how to treat or deal with the patient, how the family can take care of themselves. Am I correct?
Yeah, so that would be, I mean, this is all not happening in one visit by the entire team telling this is going to happen. So when you say stage 2 cancer, which cancer, where it is, and they are definitely going to be on some kind of primary treatment by an oncologist for this cancer, right? So if there's a surgery to be done for this particular cancer, say it's a CA colon, and now after the surgery, there's going to be a colostomy bag. So stoma care is something that the palliative care is going to ensure that the family is trained in doing, and we are teaching the patient how to do it. So other than the surgical team who will do their basic care, palliative care, because living with a stoma is not easy, so the psychological burden of it, how to have your routine activities with it, how soon can you get back and have a normal life, when to come back, all of that is going to be there. And if there are caregivers, I mean immediate family, they'll make sure that gradually they sit with the family, they understand how they are coping with all of it, and give them their input on how better can they cope with it. So all of this happens in not in one meeting. It needs a lot of rapport building and gradually everything that you said.
Doctor, for any students who are now preparing for medicine, and after seeing this episode, if somebody is interested in palliative care, what would you suggest? How do they start planning their
Yeah,
journey?
so MBBS is a must. So you have to give your medical entrance, undergraduate medical entrance, go through MBBS, and now that palliative medicine is being incorporated in MBBS, you will get some exposure as a rotation to the palliative medicine department. So I would recommend that the way you're getting exposed to the other specialties, you try to see as many patients as you can in palliative to understand all nuances of it, be it how palliative care team is actually making a difference, or how difficult it is to deal with somebody who is in maybe the last stages of their life, or dealing with a lot of emotions and how that's impacting you. So sometimes thinking that this specialty is right for me in MBBS, but then actually being there can change over a period of time. So make sure that you're making the best out of that exposure. And once you've done that and you've made up your mind that this is something that you really want to do, because it can be so fulfilling and gratifying despite all the sadness and emotional drainage that can happen, you again have to give a postgraduate entrance. And now we have MD programs in palliative medicine, but they're not offered by as many colleges as other specialties. But some primary colleges have. And even if you do not get MD in that, you can go ahead with, say, anesthesia or any other specialty of your choice. And that is how we got in there, right? So doing certificate courses and fellowship, you can basically inculcate the principles of palliative care in whatever other practice that you're doing. So it's more of a philosophy that I am a general medicine person, but I am trained in palliative as well. So I'll make sure that I don't have to go ahead and refer you to a palliative person, because I'm going to do that extra work and make sure that I am training your family. I'm empowering you guys so much.
Okay. Why would you recommend palliative care as a specialization for a student?
Because I believe that it has a lot of potential to really help people. So if you're getting into medicine with the intent of helping people, making people's lives better, it's not always about making it longer. So any other field of medicine where you're trying to make sure that the duration lifespan is prolonged, sometimes it can be that a child with a pediatric cancer, we know, is not going to get past that pediatric stage. But how do you make sure that pediatric stage is better? So that kind of impact can be done through palliative, and that can be very gratifying.
And for a student who's probably pursuing medicine, comes with the idea that I'm going to be a doctor, but is the path easy?
No, the path is not easy. I'm not going to lie here. But it's okay. I mean, you learn a lot, you will see a lot. So if you've decided you want to be a doctor, this is the best decision in time that you've taken. Go ahead with it and see where it takes you. And later on, if you feel it's not good enough and you want to try something else, koi baat nahi.
So, what are some of the challenges that they could look forward to?
Grueling hours, not as much respect or as much money as you would hope that doctors make, a lot of sacrifice on the personal front, time-wise, a lot of reading and staying updated with everything latest that's happening, and having your own moral conscious high every time, wherever the kind of setting you are in, because that cannot align, but you still have to be a part of system that's quite broken. So how do you stay at it is something you have to look at the small things that you did that impacted somebody's life. I mean, just one patient who says, "Thank you so much, doctor. You really helped," that can be something, okay, I have to do this again tomorrow because somebody was really helped.
So, at that point of time, the long hours, the lack of social life, the no respect, all of that just seems to dissolve, is it? Or
all of that is there, but despite that, you still get that, okay, but what you're doing, I mean, had you not done it, what would have happened? I mean, you really helped somebody come out of a very difficult space and time. Not that they're not going to be other doctors, but you getting to do that is also kind of joyful.
Yeah. And any suggestions or advice for students?
Suggestion and advice, I mean, be sure that you really want to pursue medicine. That is one. Talk to other people who are already doing it to get an idea if it aligns. And once you get into it, it's going to be difficult. Just show up with grit, get through it. And once you've gotten through it and you feel it's not good enough or you're interested in something else, it's okay. I mean, not everybody can decide at the age of 16 that this is something that they want to do for the rest of our lives. So yeah, but you'll have learned so much that anywhere else that you go, those transferable skills will really help you be good at something else that you do.
Okay. And final question. Today, do you regret being a doctor?
No, I don't regret being a doctor, but I do regret leaving maths because that would have given me a lot of extra skills. So I am just trying to do my best with everything that I have.
So, Dr. Vanshika, thank you so much. And from Resolve, we wish you all the best in your journey, this new chapter of your life in palliative care. I hope you get all the success and get to help a lot of people and make a difference in a lot of lives. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Sandeep. I feel really honored to be here on Resolve, and I hope I'm able to help a couple of students with their decision making. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.